Okay, so here we go. Let's see. First of all, I'd like to say thanks for anybody that might be opening this video to watch this video, or maybe somebody shared it with you. And I hope that you watch completely. This is going to be a really great video. Give us a firsthand experience of what suicide is like, suicidal behavior, suicidal thoughts, struggles that people have. And we're trying to bring more awareness to it. It's September, which is Suicide Awareness Month. And so I hope that we can bring awareness on a wider scale. This definitely could be a problem in the United States, especially with our veterans and our first responders. Their suicide numbers are higher than the general public. So if you do watch this video, please share it. Even if share it with anybody that might be struggling with suicidal thoughts or depression or anxiety, PTSD. All those things can lead you down to the suicide track. And maybe even somebody that you don't think is struggling, because at some point, we're all going to face struggles in life. And we're hoping this video brings more awareness. So that's enough of me talking. And I want to introduce Matthew here. Matthew is a veteran, and he has decided to come on and do an interview and describe some suicidal behavior, suicidal thoughts, his firsthand experience. Now, this is priceless information, because this is somebody coming straight to you that has experienced suicidal thoughts, suicide attempt, and is still here and has had massive growth in his life to get from the spot that he was to where he is now, and working on every day, living his best life moving forward. So Matthew, I guess we'll start out. If you just want to tell us a little bit about yourself, maybe what branch that you served with and how long. And
yeah, my name is Matthew Templeton, like he stated. I was in the U.S. Army from 2003 to 2007. Usually it's a 6-year contract, but I got a medical discharge out, so I didn't quite make that, even though I did re-enlist for another 6. So yeah, I was out in 2007. I was stationed down Fort Campbell, 101st Airborne Division, deployed to Iraq in 2005 to 2006 for 13 months. And yeah.
Nice. So you say when you were discharged, did that have to do directly with like a depression or suicidal feelings, or and when it happened, how did you feel with that? Did you feel like, man, it's too soon, I'm not ready to be out yet? Did that?
Yeah, so I had a few suicide attempts while I was in the service, and they had picked up on that. I was trying to get help, and instead of giving help, they did everything they could to force me out, and they did. So, and instead of actually seeing what the problem was, they decided to give me a diagnosis within an hour conversation to get me out without any disability benefits, was what they attempted to do. So,
oh, that's rough. So when you went in, you had to go through all your physical and all your stuff going in, and you went in active duty, deployed, faced some hard times, it sounds like. And then ultimately, so is that like a PTSD diagnosis that they started with?
Well, the Army didn't. The VA finally was like, yeah, you have PTSD, because the Army did not want to recognize PTSD in the standing of 2007. So if we backtrack, I was in the Army ROTC for 4 years, left the program as Cadet Lieutenant Colonel with the High School Battalion Commander. I was also in the Civil Air Patrol, which is United States Air Force Auxiliary. I did that for 6 years as a cadet, and I left that also as a Cadet Lieutenant Colonel with the River City Cadet Squadron Vice Commander. And I had a full ride ROTC scholarship. I had an acceptance letter to West Point. I had all those things going for me. I decided I was going to do enlistment first, because I wanted to get the followership down packed first. Before I decided I was going to be a leader, I wanted to try the follow. So I enlisted active duty, and then went to Fort Campbell. So I went from being one of the best, and in fact, while I was in Iraq in 2006, I maintained the Soldier of the Year for the 101st Airborne Division. So I was up there, and then coming back home from Iraq, I didn't know how to put my feet on the ground properly. It was coping mechanisms was alcohol and alcohol. So it was nothing. There's no growth. There's no grieving period. There's none of that. None of that was. We didn't have time for that. So it was still go back to training as usual as soon as we got back, and then carry forward with the mission. But I wasn't holding myself up to the standards that I had been prior to the standards that the Army has. So, but my first suicide attempt was in 2006.
Hey, Matt, so if you,
yeah,
I don't want to interrupt you there, but so you're saying that, I mean, that you had this severe, intense devotion, I mean, to the military, to our country. And I mean, all the way back from school, all the way until you enlisted, you're a Soldier of the Year, things are going well. And then you start experiencing struggle. And then basically you're like, hey, you're kind of being pushed out at that point and you're discharged. But once you're discharged, then you're basically saying you kind of found yourself where we just kind of turned to alcohol and just kind of felt lost, like kind of lost the trajectory of where you had planned on going. And now you are kind of feeling lost within yourself. Is that what you're saying? Which ultimately kind of started leading towards the suicidal thoughts?
Yeah, ideally, I had planned on 20 plus years of service. That was my goal, was to retire. If they would let me stay in for 40, I was going to be one of those 40-year members. The problem is that it's you become a number at some point, and so no matter how much you've done, once you have any issues, instead of focusing on trying to fix those issues to maintain a good element of having a soldier, you just relinquish them back to the civilian world, and that's what occurred. So
yeah, so you found yourself in that spot, and kind of maybe unprepared or just, I don't know, did you feel like it? I don't want to use the term broken because that's used so much. People are broken, you're broken, you're broken, you're broken. And then we learn, I mean, you're not actually broken, you're going through a phase of life that's going to end up giving you growth in the end. But is that what you kind of felt? And did you see that with other soldiers too? Like people coming home and getting suicidal behavior?
I think one of the biggest reasons broken is used within the military community itself is we are weapons. We're tools used for a purpose, for the mission that the Army has. Okay. When we are incapable of completing that mission, right, we're then a broken tool. I always say we're all little tools in this giant military cog, right? This big machine that's happening. And so all of a sudden this tool can't be used anymore, right? Because he's ineffective and he's not to par with the military standards. And that's how I felt myself that way, even before I was being told that way. Because I seen my physical fitness, it dropped, well, if your only coping mechanism is drinking, your physical standards are going to go down as your health declines as well.
Yeah.
So the physical fitness went down, and then with it was the I think I always say I was emotionally handicapped already, because that was never taught about how to cope with different feelings or anything that could be coming. Like, oh, depression may hit you, this is what you can do. Anxiety is going to come, this is what you can do. Yeah, so none of that was taught prior. It's not taught in high school back then, and I think they're doing it now, which is good. But the service certainly didn't teach you that. They taught you how to become the tool that they needed, and then that was that. So that broken feeling was definitely a valid feeling in that category. And then when you have a life purpose and you feel like this is my whole life's purpose here, and then you feel like you're no longer capable of doing that, it strips everything that you have away, and you're trying to reflect on yourself in the mirror, and you have nothing reflecting back, it seems like.
Which gives you that feeling of the broken, which is
Yes.
makes you end up feeling like, yeah, I'm part of this system. I've devoted myself to this system. I want nothing more than to spend my life doing this and dedicating who I am to this. And then now I can't. So you're left kind of, feeling, feeling the brokenness. But are looking back now, do you recognize that as broken? And the soldiers that you saw coming home with this, same struggle, do you look at them and say, yeah, man, they're broken? I mean, do you still recognize with that broken term, or do you see that?
So I definitely don't. And what I see now, okay, is injured, right? So for example, we have soldiers now that have had amputations, right, and have returned to combat, right? So, but they're injured. But instead of dealing with the injury that has happened to the mind, they look at it as a breaking point, and we can't have that, right? And whatever it is for liability or any of those reasons, that's the push there. But instead, we could focus on that injury that occurred, right? Because it's what happened. And so if we looked at what happened and focus on that and try to get the soldiers back to a point, then they can continue mission moving forward without having to worry about, on top of all of the stressors from PTSD and combat and everything else coming back to you, trying to figure out who you are in a civilian world that you don't even recognize, So, because if you've been out into the military world 5 years and you return home to, whatever town you're from, that town's completely different. The people are in it are different. And you've only visited them every once in a while on holidays when you have leave, a week at a time at most. So you don't actually know how anybody is anymore. So you got to restructure everything.
Yeah, you're out of your element, and you've got a different mindset, a different outlook, a different way your brain's functioning. And then if they see, some of those feelings that start coming out in you, and then they're quick also to label, that brokenness.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you're saying it's more of a, going to the misunderstood, the mental injury, it's just like an amputation. You have an injury, but it's a injury to the mind. It's a mental injury. And so the guys that are coming home, today or 20 years ago, the struggles that they have of these mental injuries that are considered broken by so many are really kind of just a misunderstood state that could be, transformed. But a lot of them don't. I mean, a lot of them end up with suicide. I mean, we know the 22 a day, like you had the 22 a day push-up challenge, trying to bring recognition to, all the veterans that are dying every day from suicide. And I mean, you yourself, I mean, how many people do you think that it either thought about suicide or attempted suicide?
I have personally lost 23 people to suicide myself. Not all of them are military, but about 90% of them are military that I've lost. 90%. Yeah. Wow. So that's 23. How many have attempted suicide that I'm friends with? I'm in the hundreds.
Oh, wow. So you're saying 23 successful
suicide
attempts.
The people I have lost, no longer with us.
Yeah. So, yeah. And 90% of those are
military. Yes.
Military. Yeah.
Yep.
Wow. And in hundreds, and out of the hundreds that that made attempts, are those mostly military you're discussing?
Yes, as well. From different organizations and stuff I've been with, I've been able to communicate with dozens and dozens of warriors like myself who have gone through that. And, and then if you just outside of those who have had attempts who deal with the suicidal ideations by itself, then I've never not met a warrior, especially one who's deployed to a combat zone, who hasn't faced suicidal ideations.
Yes, yes. And I like how, you keep saying, like, you're referring to the warrior because, these veterans, that's what they are. Warriors and a first responders the same way, fire, police, EMS, they're out there, on the streets in harm's way, and, warriors, and we appreciate and praise those people, but so many people look at them when they struggle as, they have a great career, things are going great, and then all of a sudden they do something that's not approved of, and now you're looking at them as, oh, they're a problem, they're broken. But yes, these are warriors, and they, yeah, and to lose their focus, and then by so many lose the support, either the support within, like it sounds like you lost some support within, within the military itself, or the support even on the outside. Which I guess led you ultimately to suicide attempt.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that? How many times did you have a suicide attempt?
Yes, I've had 12 suicide attempts from 2006 to 2009.
Wow, that's a lot. That's several. So you, I guess, you didn't really feel that you were gaining anywhere, that you were getting anywhere, that you were returning back to another attempt,
Right.
until you finally, made your way through. Those, it's this lot, 12 times. Here you are dedicating your life to our country and to the military, and then find yourself discharged, struggling, drinking, feeling lost, feeling broken, and actually taking on the broken mindset versus the misunderstood and mentally injured. And then you end up trying to kill yourself 12 times. What are those 12 times like? If you don't mind saying, if you don't want to talk about that's fine, but is there, taking pills, or did you?
There's been multiple. So my first time, I was overseas in Iraq, and I locked and loaded. I had an M249, and I put the barrel in my mouth. And if you don't know, the 249 is a squad automatic weapon, fully automatic, right? You press, and about 6 to 9 rounds will immediately spew out the barrel. And I charged it, put it barrel in my mouth, and I put the my thumb on the trigger. Malfunction. Wouldn't work. Tried it again and again and again and again. It wouldn't work. Next day, I needed to use it, and it worked, but not on me. So that was the very first time. Going forward, I have done a bunch of the pills and alcohol. I tried the overdose. I had a nurse tell me I'm retarded because she said I may not have killed myself tonight, but maybe in a week, a month, or even 5 years, I took enough pills that I should have died. And that was 15 years ago. So I'm still here. So I wasn't as retarded. I was retarded. I was emotionally retarded. Is what I was. She was trying to give me some tough love. But yeah, I've jumped off of a building thinking that I could kill myself, and I knocked the air out and got a bloody nose. That was it. But mostly it was the pills and alcohol, because I figured it'll put me to sleep and I just wouldn't wake up again, because alcohol was already my
go-to.
Yeah, it was my go-to, and then the pills were just easy to go down with the alcohol, and I figured that would be the best way.
So if you were this very first time you tried, weapon in the mouth, it malfunctions repeatedly. and then you go out and needed to use it, and the next day it functions. I mean, did you think to yourself when it happened, like, man, there must be more for my life? Or were you still kind of feeling like, you know, what I mean, I've got a serious struggle here, and I am, you know, I'm on my
So
way out. I don't need to be here. I'm broken, and I don't need to, obviously it didn't work for whatever reason, but I need to try again. I mean, I guess you thought that, but did the thought even cross your mind? Like,
yeah, so for the next about 4 or 5 months is what I had remaining. Um, that pushed me through. I was like, you know what? There's something here. And in my head, it was something to do while I was in Iraq, right? So while I'm in there, my purpose has got to be something I'm doing there is going to be the life-shattering, changing effects that would occur, right? That wasn't the case. So when I came back, and everything changed when I came back, I didn't have any more support, and then that just became my go-to thing, because I felt like I'm not me anymore, you know, and those demons were calling at me. So instead of trying to get help, which has always been looked down upon with the military and in any industry that deals with the warriors, the sheepdog, you know, with the first responders, military, trying to get help is looked down upon. Like, oh no, you're weak now and you can't do your job, and you're afraid of that because you don't want to be penalized for having an issue. You don't want to be penalized for saying, hey, I need some help. So you just try to hold it in. And if you can't, you would still rather try to take yourself out, let alone try to share that, hey, I'm struggling, because then you're looked upon as weak because you're trying to open yourself up, which is not the case, because most of us are realizing we've all been dealing with this. We've all been having the suicidal ideations and even attempts, you know, on those lives. And so when we have those issues, we are able to communicate with each other saying, hey, yeah, you know, this is how I'm dealing with it. This is something that's worked. Stay away from that alcohol. That's not a good thing. Don't drink that alcohol, you know? And so like,
and looking back at your younger self. Yeah.
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 So
Yeah. And you didn't want to put that out there back then, being labeled as being weak or broken or struggling, you know, I mean, possibly like what you end up facing, the discharge, you know, and if you weren't discharged, I mean, I'm assuming you'd be losing clearance, or, you know, you're going to be losing not just respect, but overall ability within, you know,
yeah.
if you are faced with any kind of mental instability, you know, which could be just strictly, I mean, it might even be a single event. I mean, did you have multiple events you think that were causing your PTSD
Yeah.
and
There are several instances.
yeah.
And the worry that soldiers has is legit. It was legit. It is legit that, hey, I can't speak out, because that stigma is still there. It's not as bad as it used to be. For me, in 2007, after one of my attempts, I had a non-commissioned officer, right? I'll leave his name out of it. But he stated to me, he said, you're not a soldier. You're not even a man. Why don't you go and kill yourself correctly tonight, right? So those words from somebody that I trusted and looked up to as a leader was sitting there telling me, hey, you ain't nothing anymore. Go ahead and end it. So that stigma of you'll be weak if you do something with mental health, that was there. Those words were spoken directly to me. And what did I do? I tried to do what he said. You know, I thought, man, you know what? He's right. I failed at it. I was probably just a lousy soldier. And, you know, if I can't take my own life, well, how should I be able to do anything else? So
you felt like you didn't even have support within, as far as your, you know, the people that you were looking to for leadership.
correct.
You felt that when, well, let me ask you this though, but by the time you were unsuccessful and you continued your mission, and then you ultimately were struggling more and more to where they eventually discharged you, and you find yourself back home, lost, misunderstood, mental injury, feeling broken. And you turn to alcohol, but you try to move forward in life, right? You try to move forward, and then did you start a family and then still have these feelings of loss and find yourself with suicide attempts after you were trying to move forward in life still? Or did your suicide attempts kind of stop by the time you were ready to start a family? Or were you kind of juggling that at the same time?
So I immediately, I was mandated to go to the vet center and have therapy. And that therapist thought by getting me a better job, better income and stuff, and that would help me instead of working towards the realm of disability. They got me a job at the Social Security Administration, of which case, while I was in there, about a year into it, the depression became too much, the ideations. I already had a couple other attempts without the Social Security knowing about it, but I administered myself into a hospital, which is where I met my first wife. Okay. Recommendations, don't do that. But so I meet my first wife there, I get out. Social Security Administration wants me to resign because they're scared of what may happen with my PTSD. So I went ahead and I resigned. And all of a sudden, that girl I met, I married her within a month, right? And the very next month, oh, she's pregnant. And as soon as I found out she's pregnant, I said, I'm not going to make any more attempts on my life. And then I quit drinking. And I actually was sober for 7 years without having any alcohol at all, because I knew I just couldn't.
No alcohol and no thoughts of suicide, no.
That's no, I still daily struggled with suicidal ideation. It was the first thing I thought about up until April 2021. So, which is a month after the PATH training that we went through.
So what is how many kids do you have now?
Now I have my son and 2 stepkids.
And even with them around and you know, being a parent and working in life and to try to improve, it took all the way until about a year and a half ago.
Yeah. Before
you really started feeling that, you know, the growth, the darkness per se, you know, I mean, the darkness that we all that face that struggle, we get to that point of like, man, it's really dark here and it's there's no, you know, real hope. I'd be better off not here for myself and everybody around. Like at some point, even when you were married and found yourself as a parent, and you were still battling that. And so it took all the way until, say, a year and a half ago before you said, hey, I can actually get better. PTSD, anxiety, depression, you know, I can improve from that. And it took all the way. So even with the kids, even with the family, like you were still facing a lot of struggle.
Right. It was basically doing what I had to do because it was my obligation. So my only reason to live was my son for many, many years. And through the divorce with his mother and the divorce, and then the second divorce with my second wife, you know, so 3 divorces later, all this just kept stacking up on top of each other, you know. And so it felt like for 15 years, the only thing I had was all this negativity to look at. And even though I had my son, but to me, I was only doing stuff because that's my job as dad, right? Was to protect him, to teach him, to guide him, and to give him the ropes for life. But while doing so, I didn't have that will for myself to carry on life until I finally learned to, through the PATH training, I learned that gratitudes, right? Just looking at what, even if it's just one simple positive thing in that day to start my day with, to end my day with, right? Will start to change the perspective. The lens kind of changes on that. And then, you know, we were doing the transcendental meditations, and those cleared the anxiety, the woes away enough for me to focus on me as to what I needed to do. I didn't know meditation could be that strong, but it did. And it was about a month of doing those meditations and a month of doing gratitudes and what was my win for the day, and journaling every single day, not just journaling like the negativities, because if I focus on the negativity, that's what I did for 15 years. I've got 15 journals somewhere of just all the negative, bad stuff in my life. But when I started to journal on only the positive thing of that day, if I didn't have anything good, I could write something and you know, about my favorite food. You know, if that's the only thing I got, then that's the only thing I got. But it's got to be a positive journal entry. So the more and more I focused on just those positives and focused on that, and also doing the transcendental meditations, the whole perspective changed. And it got to the point where the anxiety, that crippling anxiety I felt from PTSD was gone. I could just breathe. I could do what I wanted to do. And then the depression itself, the ideations, I woke up one morning and it wasn't there. And it was the best feeling I ever had. And I remember I sent a text in our group message saying, oh my God, you know, I woke up and I didn't want to kill myself, you know. And that was the first time in like 15 years I didn't feel that way. So
because and when you're talking about path, you know, I mean, Matthew's discussing warrior path, and I touched on warrior path and a couple other videos about a little bit about what that was like, what that program is. And path, it's a acronym for Progressive Alternative Training for Healing Heroes. And look it up. You know, it's a great program if you are a combat veteran or first responder, and apply and try to get in. So you're saying a lot, the stuff that you learned there, I mean, that's really where you started making the shift, was when that mental injury that you talked about earlier, when you started really treating the mental injury itself, instead of all the negative, you started, you know, the gratitude practice, writing down like, hey, I'm so thankful for whatever it is. I mean, the simplest things to complicated, you're thankful for things, a little bit of time meditating. You started doing, you know, what they refer to as the wellness practices. And you're saying you know, I mean, you were retraining yourself to be basically the Matthew of when you were enlisting, probably, you know, the focused and all that, and with all the growth that has been between then and now.
Yeah, I may not have the physical standards that I had when I was 20, you know, and when I was deployed, but emotionally, I can handle in the heat of the moments now, and I can take a step back. I can feel the anxiety. It doesn't mean that I didn't lose my hypervigilance and seeing everything, that's my hyper focus and stuff, but I don't have to let it make me anxious now, because I can take a breath, realize, what am I observing? I can do my threat analysis. Is it there? No. And be okay with it. You know, I even started to practice as what they said before. If you're this, you know, badass warrior, why do you have to keep looking at the door? If you're that well trained, can't you still handle it if your back was to the door? And I was like, oh shit, you know, like, yes, I can. So started doing that. I started being able to put myself in the situations that would normally cause me to have panic attacks, you know. And by panic attacks, I mean, I've been admitted to the hospital several times of like from blacking out from panic attacks that are so bad, or having, you know, minor seizures because the anxiety went so inflamed, to now, you know, front row Slipknot concert with 10,000 people to my back, you know.
Yeah.
And if something's going to happen, it's going to happen. But I can still respond to it as I would as a warrior, and not as, you know, somebody who's not handling the emotions.
Awesome. I mean, that's amazing progress. Well, hey, Matt, we've got a few minutes left, and I just the one thing that we're at the end of what I was going to ask anyway is just like, what would you say if you just had a couple minutes to tell somebody to sit down, like just to, because a lot of us don't want to hear anything in that real dark place, but
Right.
if you could offer just a little bit of advice to somebody, if you could talk back to yourself when you first were starting to feel all this, what would you tell yourself?
Yeah. So I had that vision that occurred to me during meditation once. And I was looking at this earth, and the earth was super sad and its face was in darkness. And you could see the sun behind it. And the earth says to the sun, it's like, I'm just so sad. It's so dark and lonely here. And then the sun says, well, if you just keep moving, it's going to be bright again. And so like when I heard that to me, it clicked into my head. And that's exactly what you can say to anybody is that brightness is coming. It may not be tomorrow. It may not be next week. You may have to work with your demons. You may have to put them in submission, or you may have to become friends with your demons and to understand them. But whatever it is in the direction that you go, that brightness, that daylight, that is coming as long as you keep moving forward. Because there could be everything that comes that's so much compound, a whole decade of negative that happened on me, but I took it forward and all of a sudden brightness started to shine because that was the new day. That was the new Jubilee coming forward in my life. And that was the time for me to be able to see that and to tell people that it is there, that darkness is here. But this is just a fleeting moment in our life. And then it's going to get brighter.
That's awesome. Yeah, awesome. Man, Matthew, I appreciate it. I appreciate all your time. I appreciate the fact that you're willing to be so open, just for no other reason than just to help people that are out there that may be in this spot. Somebody may be struggling right now or know somebody that is, and they're trying to help them so they can kind of get an inside perspective. And if you're in that spot that you're actually, you can feel like, hey man, I'm not alone. Like I understand exactly where you're coming from. I just can't tell you how much I appreciate the fact that you've been able to, come on here and talk about it. And if you've watched this, if you've watched this video, I hope that you are going to share it with as many people as you can to try to bring more awareness to suicide, to support of our first responders and veterans, and support for people that are just struggling in general for whatever their suicide reason may be. So Matt, thank you. I appreciate it. I'm going to stop recording.
20 a day does not have to be you. All right.
Awesome. Thank you, sir.
All right.